you ready? The advantage is straight into assets. Fossil fuel companies are ramping up dirty investments, mispricing assets, and creating policy uncertainty. That results in massive asset devaluation because countries will be forced to make more stringent climate policies down the line. LaPlante 17. Trump's decision to pull out of Paris complements the fight against climate change, introducing uncertainty leads to mispricing of assets. Risk associated with climate change heavily reflected in asset price out. But companies at risk of getting asset devaluation will likely be met with a rise in policy uncertainty, market volatility. The government will buy back the climate change leads to drastic and widespread devaluation. And it's reverse causal. Fossil fuel investment decreased after the initial Paris signing, but uncertainty generated by Trump's withdrawal reverses that trend by reducing the perceived risk premium associated with fossil fuel infrastructure. Curtain 18. The Trump effect changes the calculus facing investors following Paris. There's a plunge in investment in dirty assets. Fossil fuel investments face dirty, saving risk-inducing financial opportunities. The Trump effect reduced the risk rate, creating an impression that fossil fuels may not be drawn too close. American banks led to coal increase the investment by 6% after 38% drop. Slower deployment of green tech, late flattens learning curve for green tech globally. The evolutionary dynamics where hardware fairness, West Coast students, and psych research and company tendencies, step away principles of fairness, when trying to crash withdrawal cases faced by the countries follow suit. European decarbonization is inevitable. The pace can be effective. China is on track to meet its close to these commitments. Not ambitious. They might be a deep Paris pledge likely to meet the Trump effect manifests itself in reluctance to go greater ambition. And growth of renewables is inevitable. But the current transition collapses fossil fuel asset devaluation without solving warming. Only ratcheting up Paris commitments can. My timer stopped working. Can someone tell me what time I'm? Thank you. Can avoid both dangerous warming and insulate investors. Harvey 18. Carbon bubble assets are running out because the long-term would have drastically reduced emissions that struck the slump in value because the bubble to burst in such a slump is likely before 2035 based on current patterns of energy use, advances in technology, the drop in price of low carbon much more attractive with policies that would happen faster. People stop putting funding in fossil fuels. They may limit their losses. Transition happening to slowly keep within 2 degrees Celsius. Scenario 1 is econ. Bubble bursting causes a fiscal recession worse than that of 08. Lippert 9. If we keep investing in carbon bubble financial disaster, the mortgage prices look like a penny can't outgrow without proper incentives. Corporations fail to shape economic sales will until a major shock resulting in economic harm around the globe. U.S. regulators must do it. International peer central bankers have acknowledged their threat. And lacking competitiveness makes war more likely, filters their impacts because restoring economic strength is a prerequisite to solving global problems. Leader Thal Hanlon 12. American economic weakness undercuts leadership in a sense of weakness and takes action now. Less pursuing nuclear weapons adversaries, less restricted crucial regions become less stable. Major war will become likely. Foreign policy, climate visions, climate change, poverty, world for nuclear weapons. And economic decline and subsequent relationships is the biggest risk for nuclear war. Outweighs the turn to alliance reps. Leaders proactively look to divert. Thomason 15. Nuclear deterrence and economic independence may reduce the world between major powers and balanced dependencies. Neither trade of expectations generate tensions leading to trade wars among interdependent states that increase the risk of military conflict. If leaders fear to anticipate the nation of employing external dependence and refuse to nuclear arms of danger shift could happen. The greatest risk to change the world economy that hard to please foreign parents to translucent credibility, great power, thank you, let us say conventional war and conventional war. And scenario 2 is warming. GHGs are rising, alarming rate. Warming state hypergenic. The tipping point is now. Harvey 19. Since debunked over and over again, carbon dioxide concentration had been rising in present rate. Investigative warming, cooling events, ice age using climate records to determine theory. Earth's previous warming cold periods were regional events. Just one exception today's global climate change, global phenomenon. The question of emissions, major climate records, fence volcanic eruptions, because cooling events after enough time, the planet becomes scarred for present warming, more severe globally defined by the climate change that occurred last millennia. And the current electric grid is massively increasing CO2 emissions. A smart grid is essential to a sustainable energy feature. Oliver and Sabacool 17. The grid's aging infrastructure is beginning to strain under increasing demand. The average power plant is 30 years. The facility design for the last 40. The grid's economic goals have been away to a more complex, full sustainable policy development. Current trends are unsustainable environmentally. The reduction of carbon dioxide will weather double policymakers of the smart grid. The EU, US, China will invest in an R&D project. The smart grid can be an important step towards sustainable energy feature. And global warming causes ocean acidification, conflict, disease, and extreme episodic events. Urgency and coherent policy is key. Kavara, Kazana 18. Climate change, global freshwater cycle, ocean acidification pose existentialized object and connected to the water shortage to create conflict. Climate change exacerbate water scarcity. Clean water essential for human survival. Acidification is known to interfere with risk climate change. Increased storm frequency, reefs provided protection, coastal communities, unprecedented storm surge, combination of feedback loops, federal government capacity, warming cause more CO2 release, which exacerbates warming distresses, climate leads to catastrophe, and connected stress and response to environmental shock creates the greatest existential risk. Scenario 3 is grids. Nations are shifting from coping U.S. grids to preparing for an attack that could devastate critical infrastructure. This necessitates new measures. Kalafo and Kardash 18. Various adversaries, including Russia, China, and North Korea, rather been testing and backing U.S. industrial system for years. The Russian nutrition targeted industrial control system beginning at the heart of the critical public infrastructure, including energy, manufacturing, the energy sector, focus on utility hacking efforts could be signal to Russia that exploring the U.S. utility system, actually attacking the line to probably attacking between defense readiness and offensive coverage to make it even better. And attacks on the grid is existential. Societal collapse. Pride 15. Prospects depend on high-tech information, communication, financial transformation, critical infrastructure supported by the grid. China estimates cyber attack blackout of 18 months with catastrophic consequences. Blackout will 9 out of 10 conservation is set of crosshairs from hostile nations forming defenses every day. Terror attack destroys 9 key transformers to block out the entire nation, already causing large-scale blackouts. And smart grids improve resilience, so self-heal and decentralized, solving cyber concerns. Oliver and Sabacool 17. Smart grid technology improves the reliability and resilience through smart communication. The smart grid detected unexpected events through self-healing actions, reducing the interruptions. The smart grid can support distributed generation, decentralizing grids. Grid central structure can bring about cascading series of failures that bring systems to complete things. The smart grid's ability to integrate renewable And essentially, smaller smart grids run independently of the vendor attack microgrids continue to function with application of smart technology. Plan text. The United States federal government should implement an energy policy that 1. Increases the U.S. government's yearly investment into the research and development of hydroelectric, solar, and wind energy by $5 billion, and 2. Invest into segmented smart grids that run on hydroelectric, solar, and wind energy, funding from deficit spending, solvency, plan solves, Beckenhofer 17. The first effort to significantly boost clean energy R&D, U.S. government agencies, political and driving progress, massive spillover effects for the world. The U.S. government little should be increased to $5 billion. The second level is to boost clean energy demand. This creates markets, increase performance, public infrastructure, investment on smart grid to significantly boost energy demand. And wind, solar, and hydro allow the U.S. to reach 100% of electrical needs. Abraham 19. Solar and wind complement each other, so it's the highest in the summer. Wind is the greatest in the spring and fall. Wind turbines working solar products to generate analysts 36 years of weather data. Wind heavy portfolio is possible to supply 75 to 80% of its electricity needs. Hydroelectricity routed relatively straightforward to reach 100% clean energy. That's sufficient. Thank you so much for your timer.
Yeah.
And then I'm just going to read the last card.
Yeah, cool. You ready for cross-X?
Yeah.
How does the AF solve for fossil fuel companies having stranded assets if what they're investing in is fossil fuels?
Fossil fuel companies are along the grids. They transition to renewables too.
I guess why is it true that they transition to renewables when all they've ever done is invest in fossil fuels?
So since United States grids will be running on renewable energy, that means that all energy sources have to transition to renewable energy, which
Sure. I guess my question
companies
here.
Switching to renewable
I guess
energy.
my question here is how do they transition to renewables? All they've ever done is invest in natural gas
Okay, then
and
I guess
oil.
the
How do they
companies
move
shut
to
down.
that? So
I
how
mean,
does
if they can't power any electricity,
so if those
then
companies shut
there's
down,
nothing
then
they
how
can
do you
do.
solve for the scenario?
I mean,
scenario?
then there's still renewable energy, so that means it doesn't matter if
But
they.
your evidence is talking about if those oil companies go out of business, then the economy declines. If they don't transition, that happens.
So
How do you
the
solve for
argument
the
is that if they don't, so essentially, companies will be put into a double bind where either they'll have to like eventually shut down. Okay, so essentially the argument boils down to along the grid, companies will have to use renewable energy, like because that's part of the electric grid now.
Sure. The warming scenario?
Yeah.
Why are smart grids uniquely key to reduce emissions? I understand why renewables are. I don't understand the part of playing with the smart grid.
Otherwise, there's no way to effectively like mass integrate renewables.
Sure. So would the affirmative smart grid be like the same nationwide? Is it like the same grid system, I guess?
It's segmented smart grids.
Sure. So not all the same, or
Sorry, what are you asking?
like is all of our renewables now on one smart grid, or is it compartmentalized?
It's just
I.e.,
What?
like, okay, is it all connected to each other, one centralized
no.
location
There's
of control?
they're decentralized grids.
Sure.
That's why I say segmented smart grids.
Okay, that makes sense. The grid scenario.
Yeah.
If countries are looking to attack us now, why does a smart grid make it easier, or I guess why does a smart grid make it harder for them to attack us?
So basically, a smart grid insulates us from increasing and escalation attacks.
Sure.
So what the evidence indicates is that nations are now shifting from just looking at the grid to actually
guess-
launching large-scale attacks.
I guess my
If we have a
question
smart grid, it
is
resolves
more
that.
about how does a smart grid resolve large-scale attacks if it moves things to like a digitized system as opposed to the analog and decentralized systems we have now?
My evidence gives 3 warrants. First, it talks about smart communication. Right now, the grid, there's a lack of communication because we don't have highly efficient systems. Second of all, it talks about how the smart grid can self-heal. That means when there's a cyber attack, it will resolve that concern. Third, it talks about how it's decentralized. That means they're segmented, so even if they attack one grid, it can't spill over more broadly to the rest of the grid.
Sure. I guess if countries have such large incentive to attack us, why hasn't it happened ever?
So the uniqueness evidence is very compelling. It talks about how countries right now are mapping and testing our current grid so they can prepare for a large-scale attack, which is coming soon.
Cool. I uploaded it.
Awesome, thank you.
It's 5 off the advantage.
Okay, so let me just pull it up. Thank you. Oh wait, I gave you yours.
Yeah,
So-
I have mine.
Can I get some paper?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, it's longer.
Oh.
I have paper.
Anyone not ready?
I'm not ready.
What's the order? So
5 case, just the advantage.
Okay.
I'm not ready.
Okay, just let me know.
You just use this.
Yeah, it keeps moving. So,
Try to be all fancy.
okay, now is anyone not ready? Cool. First off, is the counterplan. The United States Congress should pass a concurrent resolution that increases the U.S. government's yearly investment into research and development of hydroelectric, solar, and wind energy by $5 billion. Invest into segmented smart grids that run on hydroelectric, solar, and wind energy. It solves and avoids politics. U.S. House of Representatives. Concurrent resolution is signed by the House and Senate. They are not signed by the President. And next off is the states counterplan. Texas, 50 states, all relevant territories should invest $5 billion in research and development of hydroelectric, solar, and wind energy, and invest into segmented smart grids that run on hydroelectric, solar, and wind energy. Declare a state of emergency over the dangers of stranded assets. Increase progressive taxes and borrowing funding to fund the policy, amend balanced budget rules to allow deficit spending on this policy, and participate in interstate compacts permitting intergovernmental coordination on all fields relevant to implementation of policies. State of emergency leads to nationwide submission and cooperation. That's also for funding. Pomeranz and Chang 17. SOEs are declared to address resource shortages. SOE declaration triggers the provision of state resources to all states. Have a compact to provide cross-state support in emergency. No specific set of criteria established or presumptive. SOE declaration would trigger cross-state support, coordination, infrastructure, and assistance. Next off is the removal this ad. The GOP won't defect in the Senate now, but it's possible. Shapiro 20. Discussion about impeachment has begun with the assumption that the Senate will brush aside impeachment and exonerate Trump's presidency does not rest on a strong foundation, rather hangs by a slim thread. Just 4 Republican senators will make the difference. 6. Romney is ready to draw a sharp contrast with Trump. Collins chairs their position and Maine's long line of independent senators. Murkowski stood alone among Republicans opposed Kavanaugh, Alexander, Burr, McSally, and Senate Republicans hate the plan. They'll backlash. Greenspan 19. An energy bill has fomented intense opposition from Republicans decrying the socialist mandate. And a pre-trial shock between Trump and Republicans triggers changes in trial procedure that makes defection on the final vote more likely. The plan is that shock. Lipton 19. It is inconceivable at this point that the Senate will convict Trump. At present, there are exactly 0 defections. New witnesses call to the trajectory of the process. Divisions among Republicans bar an unforeseen shock that shakes more among Republicans. The Senate appears destined to conduct an expedient trial with near party line acquittal. And credible threat of removal causes Trump nuclear strikes to save his presidency. It's existential. Oppenheimer 19. Trump is prepared to inflict the lasting damage to save his presidency. The odds of whack the law are increasing. The temptation rallies based by hyping external threat could become irresistible. A crisis provoked by Trump will present existential worse. We face oversupply crisis for a president prepared to manipulate external threats for political purposes. Disputes in the SC escalated direct clashes. Could Taiwan there could be a fallout from North Korea. Russia could move in and regain support for military restraints. Not likely to survive crisis. Our president politically motivated sees any opportunity to save his president. Internal constraints on his behavior will have all but disappeared. First use of nuclear weapons. Next up is the counterplan. Text, the United States federal government should domestically phase in a carbon tax of $100 per metric ton and in tariffs on Chinese imports. The first blank salts for warming, Inman 17. Ramp up tax on emissions of tax $100 a ton will be needed to prevent rising global temperatures. The tax will be essential loss to the refusal to deter Russell from removing the substantial charge of emissions. And the second blank salts for economy and the industries have been wrecked by the trade war. The counterplan results multiple internal links. China responds to the counterplan removing the tariffs on U.S. imports. Their tariffs were retaliatory, so reversal will boost both economies. Louder and Blanchard 18. Trump is pushing ahead with tariffs on $50 billion of Chinese imports. Chinese Commerce Ministry said we're responding with 25% tariffs on U.S. products, and that preserves millions of American jobs. Birmingham 19. Almost 1 million American jobs are at risk due to the trade war. More than 2 million American jobs could be on the line. Retaliatory tariffs on U.S. exports being manufacturers have to pay more for imported components, making them less competitive. U.S. iron and steel exports will fall by 42.7% over the 3 years if the status quo is maintained. Next off is the transition this app. The after rapid transition to renewables exacerbate the extraction, causes rapid biodiversity loss. Equal 19. Transition to renewables will require a massive increase of extraction. We're going to need 40 million tons of lithium. A 2,700% increase. This will exacerbate biodiversity loss. We're overshooting sustainable levels. 82%. Takes 500,000 gallons of water to produce a single ton of lithium. Chemical leaks kill off whole ecosystem. The higher the growth rate, the worse it will get. And biodiversity loss causes extinction. Schultz 16. Habitat destruction has negative effects. Extinction of species. Contribution of carbon dioxide. Life is independent and complex. Waste ecosystem can be recreated. The support for preservation of many species possible. We don't know what's important ecosystem for survival. We could easily produce our extinction by eliminating parts of ecosystems essential. The case. Growth is unsustainable. A. Biophysical resource constraints. Extinction. The Maria 18. Growth is unsustainable. Resources limited. Many are peaking, including oil and phosphorus. There's no decoupling. No periods through materialism. Coincide recession. The economy cannot be circular. Increase in GDP. Lead to increase in material use, energy use, and therefore unsustainable. Faith in tech has become religious. Scientific show that tech are coming way too slowly to avoid climate change. Efficient improvements lead to rebound effects. The context of growth. The more efficient you are, the more you consume. Renewable energy produces less energy because it has a low ERI. It cannot satisfy energy consumption. Growth might not be social desire. Inequality is on the rise, and lifestyle is stagnant. The financial system proponents of nations need to adopt a degrowth strategy. And B is peak energy. Rutherford 17. Growth is correlated with energy consumption. Supply constraints are likely to incentivize this strongly, but it's also diminishing returns rate of increase. Energy availability is slow. Further peak in fossil fuels will be reached between 2025, 2050. Fossil fuels make up 86% of energy use in the world, particularly critical power. 95% of transport new discoveries have been made in decline. Discoveries are smaller fields, more rapid peak and decline rates. A recent boom in U.S. oil is likely to terminate within the next 5 to 10 years. This is generating an oil supply crunch and price spike that send the debt burden economy into a bigger and better global financial tailspin. There is absolutely no evidence that oil demand is in decline and continue to increase in an accelerated rate. When peak oil does arrive, they are likely to be more powerful incentive to implement coal to liquids or gas to liquids, but having huge logistical infrastructure problems accelerate peaking of coal and gas supply, especially given the energy efficiencies in fuel conversion. And C is water. Horticulture 14. Water scarcity will grow as a result of economic growth demands for irrigated agricultural storage infrastructure. Supply chains stretch across the globe. Water use is not sustainable. Regions that overexploit their resources, corporate engagement is cynical. And D is horrible financialization. Haggard 17. Economic structure in the U.S. is real world flaws to collapse. Inevitable banks are much bigger. Banks are still allowed to invest in risk asset erosion and middle class, leading to us in class warfare, cultural war between liberals and conservative immigrants and natives. The national debt created a tough starting point for recovery. The corporate debt has increased at catastrophic levels. We're back in housing bubble. Interest of debt remain low but started rising at a rapid rate. The realities make continuing on edge of collapse. They are all structural economic flaws. And transition from growth is key. Ahmed 17. Crisis convergence, destabilizing acute regions here and now. Intensification of political violence can be seen as the direct result of this systemic crisis. It takes 15 years for our government to experience systemic state fear. Its energy economic-based decline relative to climate-induced water food crisis after 2030. Indo-Chinese periphery experience systemic state failure. Cases point to a global civilization transition. Civilization finds itself a systemic shift, which is already manifesting every major region. Global failure paves the way for systemic transformation and faith in the global system. Well before 2050, state failure will be given away irreversible. The minds of neoliberal finance capitalism, their remains of capacity agents, generate adaptive response to enhance collective conscious to break down system heroes potential for post-breakdown transformation. Growth turns to impact. First, economic decline solves war. Declare 15. First, states that view each other as threats. The biggest step toward cooperation. Terminating rivalry, drawing a net of 190 rival. 967 terminated evidence such rivalries were likely to terminate their endowments. This is true for all explanation. Democratic status, nuclear weapons possession capabilities, common enemies, international systemic changes, peace may result from economic troubles, economic crisis, austerity pressures, encourage strategy, reassessment, increase political and economic benefit, cooperation leads to more prone select leaders perceived capable of resolving difficulties, and growth causes war. India 17. Glob and myths are casually related. Evidence shows robust association between globalization and military expenditure. Countries experience globalization, large increase in militarization, mark the card of militarization, and growth towards warming. It makes cutting to below 2 degrees Celsius impossible. Alexander 15. Humanity must avoid rise of more than 2 degrees Celsius. Wealthy nation need to decarbonize their economies at 8-10%, starting immediately. Emissions reduction of more than 1% have been associated with recession. Decarbonizing will make a significant reduction overall energy consumption, and the economy cannot continue growing. I'm gonna skip for some cards. Grid resiliency now, especially critical military if you're Staccato and Seagull 19. FERC resolve transmission issues. Policies provide incentive for transmission lines to bring renewables in. An energy department is spending a lot of resources on a battery storage to improve grid resiliency, which relates to the grid ability to bounce back from weather. The card is marked up weather.
Okay. Would you mind setting an updated doc? Because there's like a lot of cards somewhere in here. Thank you.
It's up.
Let me just pull it up. Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
I'm assuming all counterplans are condo.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me what the net benefits are for each?
Sure. The concurrent resolution counterplan's net benefit is politics. The state's counterplan is politics. The multi-plan counterplan is both. Both of these ads.
How is a carbon tax?
It's not viewed as a progressive energy policy like increasing renewables, which is the issue.
Where does your evidence say that? Because your link card on politics is literally one line.
Sure, it's referring to things such as the Green New Deal, renewable energy policies, as opposed to the carbon tax, which is more or less popular with the GOP and conservatives because it allows oil companies to still emit some without collapsing totally.
Literally, your link evidence says an energy bill has fomented intense opposition from Republicans to crime.
The top of the card is referring to things like the Green New Deal, which wants to increase.
Where you didn't read?
Sure. I mean, you can make those arguments. If I'm going for this, I'll make the articulation that it is not linked to the counterplan because the carbon tax is popular with the GOP and conservatives.
Okay, cool. So then let's go on to the rapid transition disad.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just all about different metals that are being used, correct?
Sure. It says all of these metals are critical for renewable energy.
Okay, cool. So then on Oh wait, did you read the? Okay, sorry, you said not right under there. Now I
Yeah.
understand. Okay, so then on growth. Okay, sure. On growth unsustainable. What's the warrant for solving warming?
Sure. Without growth, we don't have things like industrialization, mass carbon emissions,
What's
etc.
the time frame for that to solve warming?
What do you mean?
Like,
I mean, like,
how
if
soon?
growth collapses, we transition to a degrowth society that Ahmed talks about, where we don't have things like big factory, global trade that requires us to like fly
Yeah.
planes everywhere, emissions everywhere.
But like, how long does that take?
What do you mean? The collapse?
Like, you say econ collapse happens. How
Sure.
long does it take that we literally just get rid of
I mean,
planes
so-
and all infrastructure?
So the 1AC makes a structural like uniqueness claim that economic collapse is inevitable. We're saying that is true. As soon as economic collapse happens, we transition to the degrowth societies because there are movements now, as per
I
Ahmed.
understand your argument. I'm just still not getting an answer to how long does it take for us to get rid of all modern
As soon as growth
infrastructure?
collapses, we'll say that.
How?
Well,
How?
because people no longer have incentive. Ahmed says like we already want to move to degrowth societies. All we need is the impetus to push us over.
Who wants to move to a degrowth society?
Like Ahmed says, there's a bunch of social movements where we're seeing that because of the inequalities that growth has happened, there's a bunch of movements in the like
So,
southern world
Like,
that has moved against it.
what movements? Obviously, the United States doesn't have a tangible movement against growth.
Sure, even like absent that, the fact that we are winning the terminal claim that growth is unsustainable means like either way we can't recover back to growth, which means we won't have all the emissions that growth brings with it.
Okay, cool. You said this. Sorry. This timer is confusing test.
Sorry.
You're good. Okay, I'll start from now. And prep. I have 114 remaining. And I'll send it off. Where'd it go? Okay. So the order is going to be Nuoff. Then it's going to be the advantage, going in order. And then it's going to be the concurrent res counterplan, the states counterplan, the carbon tax counterplan, and then it's going to be the impeachment disad, and then the renewable disad. Everybody ready? First off, interpretation. The negative only gets one conditional counterplan option. They violate multiple conditional counterplans bearing net benefits. Vote affirmative. It's a priori. One breaks the format. It's not possible for the 1AR to generate enough offense against multiple conditional counterplans the 1AR, which makes the 2NR impossible. Short speech times means even if you like conditionality in this format, we need a limit to one conditional options. Format, offense first. It's specific instructional. Two, not reciprocal. The half can't kick plane shifts the debate in favor of the neg. In high-level debates, the neg is already advantaged to make the round fair. Three, destroys clash. Can't generate enough arguments. The counterplan means all engagement is super shallow. Ensures weak education. That controls the internal link to critical thinking, because if we don't have enough time to develop arguments, skills don't matter. Voters for fairness and education. Let's go on to the advantage. First, starting on the advantage, you can start on the stranded assets advantage. Companies are mispricing their assets right now. That means that there's going to be an inevitable transition to renewables that thumps all of their disads as well as thumps their DDEV terms, because that means that the sort of collapse that they articulated, that means that their disads are going to be inevitable. The offer stops that by preventing the bubble, which prevents escalation to nuclear war. All go line by line their responses. First, they say that we're using too many resources, but our articulation is that renewables are a new form of technology that's going to resolve any resource overuse. Then they say that there's sort of peak energy, but our argument is that we no longer have this sort of energy fluctuation problems in a world of renewables. Then they make this argument about water. However, we're going to resolve water better because we resolve climate concerns. And they make this horrible financialization argument. It just says the U.S. economy structure is bad. It never terminalizes anything or says anything particularly persuasive in the card. Rather, the U.S. has used the same economic structure for such a long time. General response: degrowth doesn't solve, but backslides alternative development, spikes oil uses, and just regrowth worse. Page 12. The stock market crash in response to degrowth would have an immediate effect on the broader economy, which is systematic credit crunch. The most lethal effect the real economy would include fiscal and monetary policy intervention would eventually lead to inflation to stabilize the economy. Long-term cycle positive economic growth resume is unlikely. Ecological concerns will be addressed by degrowth. The environmental issues less important during the economic and political development of all sustainable alternatives. Only temporary positive ecological concerns. Crude oil prices, but climate change issues the back burner. Energy consumption would eventually respond to carrying capacity, and this time more damaging for environment due to significantly delayed development of alternative resources. Then they make this argument that they solve war, but Clary relies on rare event regressions, which are known to have overt statistical biases against wars. Allison 12. There's lots of misconceptions that publish on the reality events, but the small number of cases in the two outcomes, even with a sample size of 100,000 to only 20 events, the sample you may have substantial values. Controlling for rare event regressions, comprehensive analysis finds decline equals war. Term 10. Results suggest bad economic conditions will innovate the most serious fatal competitions that powers threaten both sides. Discontent with their full of most systematic problems, leading the country to performing full of testing, clear performance for events, larger population, and verifies whether events of dependent variables, cross-sectional characteristics, absolute their funding respectively. Extend Tonneson, it says the collapse of economic interdependence is going to lead to war because countries no longer have a cooperation to cooperate. Then they make this argument that they're going to resolve for global warming, but one, they concede solvency. That means I have 100% solvency to resolve warming. It's try or die. At least I'm giving you a tangible policy that solves warming. Well, they're just giving you movements that obviously aren't true, as well as the topic evidence answers this. So as the second scenario, warming, you can extend the warming scenario as try or die. GHG emissions are on the rise. Warming will lead to multiple existential scenarios. The convergence of factor means rare episodic event will instigate conflict and violence that is going to outweigh their economic collapse arguments, because warming is a much bigger impact on probability. Then let's go on to the third. You can extend the grid scenario. Grids are being attacked right now. Nations are shifting to attacking smart grids. Resolve this problem by enhancing cooperation and resolving it. That prevents an existential scenario. They say that grids are being resolved right now. However, it's not sufficient. They just say pilot projects. That's going to outweigh because it's a more immediate impact. Let's go on to the first counterplan that they read. Concurrent res. No net benefit. Concurrent resolutions would still trigger their. Never mind. The counterplan makes no sense. Concurrent resolutions are just internal congressional acts. LT 10. It is absurd how congressional concurrent regulations lack of force of law not signed by President. Concurrent resolutions only thing that impact Congress, such as correcting bills, the budget process of a House resolution 12% deal with budget process. will take charge. The lack of grid reliability hurts innovation, increases the chance of cyber attacks. Elson 13, innovation be set optimal without federal investment. The grid has to work continuously. Must be NRC police important role conduct reliability enforce standards in accordance with Federal Power Act. Integration too difficult to leave any SBO putting into action. Two vulnerabilities cut the card. Vulnerabilities. Let's go on to the carbon tax. No arguments about how the counterplan is a net benefit. Oil tax leads massive release of oil and spurs tremendous renewable investment. The carbon tax revives the coal industry. Bailey and Backendor. 16. The coal industry is being faulted with the national gas only helps the industry meaning prolonging life of the carbon tax. Less punishing this coal industry. The regulations have to pack us leave better off economically. Also, the econ thing makes absolutely no sense. We have tariffs now. We haven't seen economic collapse. That's unlike the large advantage. Let's go into the impeachment dissat. The first part. Trump's basis renewable energy employees. They elected him and massively outnumbered coal workers. Brand is 18. All across the country, growing legalization, the future reorganized around renewables. 47,000 coal mining, 50,000. The wind and solar jobs are growing 105%. Wind and solar, the forces comprise Trump's base, one of the 5 biggest wind power states, given 57 electoral votes. Trump's tariffs eliminate 23% of jobs. The Republican district hosts 85% of total installed wind capacity. The workers who elected him. Impeachment does not cause lash out. Kelly 19. Foreign policy radicalism covered Trump to become a best with domestic policy. Impeachment 2020 election removal. Trump would raise the international trouble. The international listen. Trump has ever created an intellectual movement or had anything in the face of globalism. Brad Whiting, the U.S. is committed to international order. He's the fourth program they're hiding. Their link evidence is awful. Doesn't even mention spark rates. Let's go into their second dissat. They've conceded that renewable implementation is inevitable. That means I've already thumped the link. And I control the internal link to biode, crossplay, Cavera, and Gazana. Climate change, the root cause of destruction. CO2 is absorbed by the ocean, leading to acidification, kills all life. And GMX being solves biodiversity. VOD 19. Efforts preserving and enhance biodiversity. GMX the storage of liquid nitrogen samples distribution is needed to prevent the diversity species, climate change, biopreservation, relationships, environmental factors, broad landscaping, biopreservation. Also, their evidence outlines a number of thumpers, such as other forms of technology. Such as other forms of technology which are going to thump the diss up. You can easily go off on a risk of offense.
4.
My throat really dried out at the end there.
No cards. It's going to be the concurrent resolution counterplan, the states counterplan, the carbon tax counterplan, the impeachment dissad, the bio-D dissad, the theory flow, then case.
I just want to make sure that I understood the order. You're going to do all the off case, then the theory.
Yep.
At the bottom of that. Okay, just want to make sure I'm correct.
There's no doubt. Okay. Is anyone not ready? Cool. The concurrent resolution counterplan, we're not going for it, there's no offense. The states counterplan, we're not going for it, there's no offense. The carbon tax counterplan, we're not going for it, there's no offense. The impeachment decide, we'll concede that impeachment doesn't cast lash out, which means they don't get access to their link turn. The bio-D decide, we'll concede that gene bank solves, which means they don't get access to their offense. Theory. Interpretation, we get three conditionality with no cross-application. Cross-application goes con is good, one is risk averse, gives negatives, a fallback strategy, encourages resources opposed to generates the key to topic entry, and second info processing, deciding how to respond to large amounts of information, supportable skill to convert info overload, towards the adaptation, hard debate is good debate, since turns their education stand, defending against more position, better for resource skills, and we learn more about energy policy. Three is Netflix, con was necessary, topic of all these, and non-unique in politics, or politics, and there are no generic counterplays. Their interpret means counterplays become, in case become bad strategy, kills coordinate ground, makes being negative impossible, because the 2AC knows what we're going to be going for, it spends all their time there, turns education fairness, air negative, the Africans infinite prep in the first last speech, and 4 is logically judge over the best policy. Anything else is a real world. Here's some defense. Reject the argument of the team. Rejecting the team because substance crowd. Just take the counterplans instead. And time and strategy was inevitable. We should just read DA's K-stars or NT instead. They're in terms of topic education because teams will just cut the ace a few counterplans, which moves the debate away from energy policy. E-conflict. Growth guarantees environmental destruction through over-consumption of resources and increased land use and carbon emissions with the next biodiversity, keystone species, and ecosystem, and culminates in extinction. Humanity cannot survive without a stable biosphere due to increased temperatures, which destroys crops, sea level rise, ocean communications, destroys ocean food supplies and resource conflicts, which turns their advantages. Now, growth alone turns all their impacts. First is war. Growth causes war, but degrowth solves multiple wars for Ian, Dowson, and Claire prefer. Their evidence is purely hypothetical and doesn't count for any empirics, which we do. First is that they analyze countries with high rates of globalization, determine a robust association between globalization and military expenditure. Bilateral trade increases the cost of war, but globalization reduces the cost and thus increases the probability of war. Second is high rates of growth have empirically led to higher military spending, which causes a use it or lose mentality and increases risk of conflict escalation. Countries are more likely to overestimate the strength of their military in times of high growth. Leaders are more less likely to step back down from conflict. They can funnel more money into manufacturing problems. Soviet Union, Hungary, El Salvador, Honduras, Ethiopia all prove this, but low growth lowers leaders' hubris, making them less likely to initiate and maintain conflicts and forces leaders to cut military spending and focus on domestic issues instead. And third is downturn causes leadership changes. It ensures aggressive war-mongering leaders go out of power. Growth ensures populist leader like Trump, Putin, Z, and all the rest all stay in power and escalate conflict. For this, empirics clearly analyze over 100 instances of economic decline and determines rival countries are more likely to increase cooperation. This is true across all political circumstances, military capabilities, and country size. Crisis forces leaders to adopt strategic reassessment, which often leads them to believe cooperation is the best option. Prefer our evidence. It's the only statistically backed model. Theirs is purely hypothetical. This also answers the cyber scenario because their scenario is predicated on people attacking us, which means in a degrowth world, no one has incentive to attack us. The Clarion diet, it sucks. It applies to them just as much, just as you should prefer higher probability impacts, which means you are negative because we have the stats to back it up, where theirs just say economic decline might cause war, and that's obviously empirically disproven because, oh wait, we also turn warming. A growth world massively increases carbon emissions. Growth means more factories, more manufacturing, more global trade, and more constant destruction of the environment. But degrowth solves because it's the main driver of climate change is growth. The degrowth world solves the transition to a low carbon world. We'll do that more on the transition debate. Either way, there's a huge framing issue. Growth is unsustainable, which means even if you don't believe any of the rest of my offense, it frames the debate. If we are winning that growth is unsustainable, it means they can't solve for their impact, and you just default neg. Now, there's a couple reasons growth is unsustainable. One is peak energy. Fossil fuels are running out, and they're key to sustaining growth. Renewables won't solve. Second is financialization. Our economy is ridiculed with flaws, which makes collapse out of less haggard. Too big to fail. Banks are investing in risky assets are on the verge of defaults, and the erosion of the middle class is creating structural inequalities. Corporate debt is prevented, making defaults inevitable. Another housing bubble is present. Several of the world's largest banks are about to pass water. Hortzka says that growth increases demand for animal products, biofuels, irrigated ag, which cause climate change, drought, and water shortages. Send shockwaves through supply chains and guarantees collapse in resources. They're depleting. RF says 40 irreplaceable materials are running out. Phosphorus, chromium, copper, tin, lithium, coal, oil, gas. Others are running out. They're essential to society, and there are no known substitutes. That internal links their tech arcs because governments and companies won't use renewables during the time that the economy collapses. Either way, their only answer to the sustainability is renewables solve for it. No, it doesn't. There's a couple of answers for one and see tomorrow. First is resource efficiency. There's too large of an incentive to use fossil fuels because of their greater energy return on investment. Renewable energy is far too low, which means there isn't a financial incentive to transition to that form of energy. Second is Gibbon's paradox. Even if they win in efficiency improvements, that's net bad. Greater efficiency reduces the price of commodities, which increases consumption, which means means ecological benefits are lost. It often leads to greater rebounds and resource consumption. Third is electricity intermittency and storage make renewable energy far too expensive. Electricity only 18% of total energy consumption, while transport, pesticides, plastic, and biofuels are 82%, which obviously they can't replace their renewables. Simply shifting renewables isn't large enough with change, which means that they cannot solve for sustainability arguments. You're voting neg right there. I'll do the transition debate here. There's a couple reasons transition solves for growth in both our impacts. First is social movements. They're rising now in the Euro-Atlantic, China, and the U.S. due to systemic crisis. Crisis is key to increase their prosperity. They can develop adaptive and peaceful responses that bolster collective action and systemic transformation. Second is mindset shift. Our emphasis crisis shifts people toward conservation. Studies show 200 million people are already practicing conservation, and crisis will only amplify that. Crisis forces people to adopt alternative ways of life where they take green practice seriously. This social science research shows consumers will subconsciously adopt similar practices, which a crisis economic austerity will amplify. And third is time for bottom-up initiatives where degrowth will feel absent in crisis soon. The delay in a collapse by propping up the economy means movements can't check eco-destruction. They can't adapt to increase efficiency. Those are key. Otherwise, we are impact. Their only on this is really, really, really trash. It doesn't assume new social movements or resource crunches. All it's saying is that hypothetically, if the economy were to collapse, we try to go and restart it. But look, their app doesn't assume the new social movements. It's from 2012. It doesn't assume the fact that right now is when we are worrying about ecological destruction. Look how no one talked about climate change before 2015. It's now that the movements are happening. Their app does not assume this. It's also all speculation, and from a professor of finance who obviously has incentive to say that growth is good. We're not going to get to degrowth, so he can keep his job. You vote neg because our impacts turn theirs. We outweigh on time frame. We solve their impacts, and also the economy is unsustainable. Renewables can't solve.
Okay, I have 1:15 left, I think.
Okay, I'm gonna run and get water.
Okay,
You have like 6 seconds.
thanks. The order is going to be condo. Okay. Everybody ready?
Mhm.
This was obviously a massively abusive negative strategy. They deployed 3 counterplans in the 1 and C and then decided to kick them all in the 1 and R and drop all of their disads. That not only skews affirmative ground, but makes it impossible to be affirmative. And you can accept my interpretations. If negative gets 1 conditional advocacy, this is going to resolve all of their offense. All of their standards on why condo is good. It's not why multi-condo is good, just 1 condo. That means my interpretation is going to resolve all of their standards, and it's really easy for me to vote there. But let's look at their interpretation. Their interpretation says they get 3 advocacies. 1, there's no bright line as to why they get 3. There's no unique reason as to why 3 is uniquely not abusive. Second of all, they don't meet their own interpretation. Their interpretation says that they're not going to be contradictory, but they were. They read a carbon tax counterplan that had a net benefit that was boosting the economy. That's contradictory with the data that they go for. That means you can't vote for the right there because they read an interpretation that they didn't even meet. Now, let's go on to the standards debate. First, you can extend my standard that say that they break the format. This specifically talks about LD, Lincoln Douglas debate. It says that in LD debate, it structurally skews the 1AR because we only get a 3-minute speech to answer it. It talks about how it's impossible for us to generate offense. All of their standards are specific to policy debate. So you should err affirmative on this question because my standard is strictly determined by NFALD debate. Second, you can extend my standard that it's not reciprocal. It's not fair for the negative because we don't get to just advocate for one sort of policy. We have to advocate for stable advocacy. Well, they get just to run 3 counter plans. Then you can extend my third standard that it destroys clash. There's no clash and engagement. We're not having a very good debate because the negative is just running countless advocacies. 3 is too many. I'll go on their standards. First, they say it's risk averse, and that's exactly my argument. The negative gets to do whatever they want. That destroys fairness at the point where the affirmative is structurally skewed out of the debate. We can't respond within the confines of the time limit. Second, they say it's prosperity. A hard debate is good debate. It's not hard for you. It's super easy when you get to read as many counterplans as you want. 3 is too many. Skews the negative out. We're not having any sort of critical thinking, which is generated off of my first standard. Then you say it's key to neg plus. You send your third option, but first of all, one condo obviously resolves this, and second of all, it's negaflex is bad. When we act as policymakers, we're all acting in one sort of uniform fashion. It's not reciprocal. That's what my second standard says, which means it's not fair. Then they say it's logical. It's not logical because policymakers have one unifying position. They don't contradict themselves or provide multiple policies. They have one sort of thing. That means it's not educational debate, specifically when it destroys clash. So there's no critical thinking, which means that we're not educating ourselves. Then they say reject the argument, but don't reject the argument. That's literally dropping their counterplans they already dropped. It's a voting issue. That's why you can extend my that it's a voter unfairness. They say it's inevitable, but it's not inevitable. In this round, you can set a standard in which conditional advocacies are allowed, but 3 aren't, right? You should drop their argument. It's unfair if you just drop the counterplans that they already dropped, which is why it's a voter for fairness and education.
Great.